Café and Networking Podcast promotes successful business experts. I'm Tom Reaoch, known as the King of Networking, connecting people throughout the world from my podcast studio in Brazil. And today we talk with Ed Parcaut, and he's joining us from Modesto, California. Ed Parcaut is CEO of Lending for Living, author of best-selling book Financial Freedom, Building Personal Wealth Through Homeownership, and also a podcast host at Inner Edison Podcast. So, Ed, how do you use your podcast to educate and inspire your audience?
Well, I use, like we were talking before, I have multiple podcasts and a radio show, and I use my radio show to promote my business and educate clients on home ownership. And it's really about community, because nobody wants to listen to what's the rates today, what's going on in real estate every week. They want to hear, about community, other stuff, and then also keep them informed with the other thing. And that's how we do it on what's called the Real Estate Jerky. And that's a podcast you can find everywhere. And then I also have the Edison.
That's a talk show format then.
Yeah, it's actually live. It's on radio. So it's a totally different. So from podcasting to radio, it's a totally different world. And because you got breaks and interruptions during the whole thing, you got to stay on time. And I didn't realize how much you have to stay on time until I've been doing it for 5 years. And then now I'm the president of my Rotary, and I run my Rotary meetings exactly the same way I run my radio show. And everybody's like, you're very militant. It's like, you don't understand. They cut you off on radio. You're like,
that's
this
right.
time's done. You're done. You don't get to say this. If you got to get it in there, you have to get it in there. And that's what I do.
That's really where pitch comes from in anything. And even from a business sense, your Rotary friends, they need to how to express themselves, objectively.
Correct. And it's taught me how to be where I can just talk, right? Where either on stage or anywhere now, because I've been live on radio, live on video for the past 5 years. Prior to a couple of years ago, I wasn't anywhere on video except for the radio show. And now you can find me I do 9 lives a week from the radio show. And then I also do my Inner Edison podcast, which is our greatest accomplishments come from our greatest defeats. And I talk about failures. And that's the whole purpose of having the show, to understand that you're going to fail and it's okay. Right. You just have to learn from it and move forward. And the more you talk about those failures, the better you're going to be. And I've had many people come on, and I did it for 2 years, and I kind of felt like I lost my pace where I was trying to go with the show to stay with the failure thing. And so I stopped it for 6 months, recouped, and then I've been doing it for the past 2 months back up and running. And it's really, people, you have to talk about your failures. If you don't talk about your failure, the podcast won't air.
That's true, and we see that, failure leads to success. It's hard to find any successful business person who hasn't failed.
Well, one of my past people I've had on was Brian Smith. He brought UGG to America, and people think it was 15 years success, no problem. He lost the company. He did, he talks about how, and he had to get it back and the whole thing, and how his wife yelled at him because he was laying on the floor feeling really bad for himself. And she told him, get your ass off the floor. Excuse my language. And he got up and he got the company back, and, eventually sold it. And then now he tells the story. So it's important to have those stories in your life to understand that's where you come from. So.
Well, you as a communicator, and we find that. So it's the voice, you the written part. You've written a book. A book leads you to other speaking engagements, because as an author myself, people want to hear you talk about your book. They don't say they want to read it, but you will be invited. So the speaking and the audio, the video, as you mentioned, people want to see you. Seeing is believing. And they want to hear the story. They want to feel the story.
And the reason I wrote my book is because there's only one of me. And the way I do when I qualify somebody, I do it differently than a lot of people. And I wanted to put that in a book so people understood how it should go through the process and how easy the process really is. I don't know what it's like where you are in Brazil, but I know what it's like in the United States and in certain, other places, but not necessarily where you are.
But in any sense, a process of acquiring ownership of a home, and that's the first step most people want. There's bureaucracy involved anywhere. It's it's just not cut and dry. It's just not turn on the switch and you get it. So there's a process involved, in understanding that there is a process, and also value. Where do you understand where the value is?
Right. Well, in the United States, it's so much easier. We have programs where you can do 100% financing and 3% down and 3.5% down, where a lot of countries don't have that.
No, not at all. They really don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's so important to get into home ownership. So I don't want to say you're in the game, but basically once you own that home, as values go up, you're going up with them. Until you buy that home, you're stuck with renting, and those values could outpace you.
Right.
Just I'm in California, as you said, Modesto. In about another 5 years, probably 70% of the people will not be able to own a home in California. They'll have to rent.
Oh, and that's a tendency even here, where I am, and worldwide. The ability, to rent in short term, that's still the fact. So that's sort of everywhere, and that's a bigger problem. But you, as a communicator, as a professional, you're talking recently of your last 5 years of everything you've done. Where do you get your personal enjoyment? What brings you happiness?
Actually, having conversations. Truly,
talking,
and my wife
whether it's radio, whether it's podcasting, whether it's on stage.
Yeah, it's really having. I'm a conversationalist. I like to have the conversation. I didn't realize I sold by the phone for about 18 years of my life, and I didn't realize how well I did because of my voice. I didn't understand my voice was deep. I didn't understand any of that kind of stuff until I put headphones on. Right, because you don't hear your own voice until you put the headphones
most
on.
People don't. Most people don't, and,
right.
and then you hear, well, you have a radio voice,
right? Yeah. And a face for radio.
Well, too.
But it's so important, and so I did really well. And so it's having that that conversation with people and understanding why they're doing what they want to do and where they want to go, and helping them get there is what I want to do. And that's how I do it on all my podcasts, having the same conversation. Why are you here? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to get across to people so they can understand? Because even I do another one called Helping the Brave, which is for veterans once we take the uniform off. And it's talking about that transition and what you went through, and if you have PTSD, how we can help you with that, and all the other stuff. And that's done very well. And it's just like the Edison's done really well. That's in the 1% of all podcasts in the world, not in the United States, but in the world, where Helping the Brave is a smaller niche because there's only about 10% of us that are veterans.
No, but and that's important. That's true everywhere. But even you mentioned Rotary. Rotary is an engagement, a community-focused engagement. But even to that, I'm sure you help your fellow Rotarians understand that they need to communicate.
I hope so. I mean, that's when I'm a vet still. And we're direct, and we don't ask for help. There's a lot of stuff that we have problems with, and so I'm still that way. I'm trying to help, but I don't always know if they're getting the help they need.
Well, you are as a model, as a role model, anyway. What are our background? That's part of the modeling. Accepting failure, talking about success, and being successful. That's part of the story. So,
I was so private until I got on radio, if you understand what I mean. Nobody knew everything that happened to me, and now everybody knows what's happened to me. And the more you open up and tell your story,
and more people know,
right? And more people want to know about you and want to do more, understand what you have to talk about. They don't care what you know until they know how much you know, or they don't care what you know until they know how much you care. That's the statement I was trying to get at.
That's true. That's empathy. So to that, in our audience, I'm sure they're going to want to hear more. How can they find you?
I'm lucky. My name is Ed Parcaut, Parcaut, and you can find me everywhere under that name. But the best way to find me is go to my website, which is edparcaut.com.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing your time and experience, Ed.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, and then to our guest, it is Ed Parcaut, E-D, the last name Parcaut, and you'll find him at his site, edparcaut.com. You find him on LinkedIn. Find him on TikTok as Ed Parcaut. Café Networking is brought to us by Focus MI Market Intelligence, an agricultural market research specialist in Brazil. More information at focusmi.com. Talk to Tom, talk to the world. Thanks for listening. Until the next time here at Café and Networking Podcast.